Hello everyone, and welcome to my The Bold Fans channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Brooke Logan stood in the dark light of her Forrester Creations office, the hum of Los Angeles traffic coming through the window. Her fingertips touched the edge of a sketchpad, with the latest drawings for the intimate collection spread across her desk. It was late, well past the hour when most staff had gone home, but Brooke was unable to leave. Not tonight. Her mind was filled with questions, concerns, and a nagging suspicion that had become too loud to ignore. She looked at the framed portrait on her desk, she, Ridge, and their children, smiling in a moment that seemed like a lifetime ago. The weight of her previous decisions crushed against her chest, a familiar ache she'd grown to bear. But it wasn't about her. This was about Taylor. Taylor Hayes, her long-standing rival, confidant and occasional friend, had been acting strangely for weeks. Her typical elegance was fraying at the edges as she remained distant and guarded. Brooke had spotted it first at a charity dinner, where Taylor's grin fell short of her eyes and her hands trembled as she gripped her wine glass. Then there were the quiet phone calls, and Taylor's eyes glanced away when Brooke inquired about her son, Thomas. Brooke initially chalked it up to stress. After all, their lives in the Forrester and Logan families were never easy. But the pieces didn't fit together, and Brooke's instincts, trained over years of handling betrayals and secrets, told her something was seriously wrong. It began with a single photograph. Brooke had been assisting Taylor in organizing files in her hospital office, a rare example of the two women working together. Taylor had left to take a call, leaving Brooke alone with a stack of old documents. A fading Polaroid with ragged edges sat between medical journals and patient notes. It depicted a younger Taylor, glowing and laughing, her arms wrapped around a man with black hair and a friendly smile. The familiarity in their posture was undeniable. On the back, Taylor's exact penmanship read, "James and myself, 1992. Brooke's breath caught. James Warwick. The name brought back recollections of a guy who had been a part of their twisted world years before. A psychiatrist, a friend, and someone who had previously been close to Taylor. But why was this photograph hidden away? And why now? Brooke did not disclose the photo to Taylor. Instead, she returned it to where she found it and let the questions boil. Days stretched into weeks and the discomfort increased. Brooke grew obsessed by Thomas's sudden interest in his mother's background, the way he avoided queries about his childhood, and Taylor's cryptic words about protecting what matters most. She began searching, gently at first, piecing together parts of Taylor's life from decades prior. Old letters, hospital records, and whispered discussions with mutual friends presented a picture that didn't add up, until it did. The truth hit Brooke like a tidal wave one rainy afternoon. As she sat in the Forrester Mansion's library, a stack of preserved documents sprawled out before her. Among them was a birth certificate she had never seen before, concealed in a file classified personal confidential. It belonged to Thomas. The father's name, written in bold black ink, was not Ridge Forrester, as Brooke had always assumed. The name was James Warwick. Her hands shook as she read the page again, as if the words could rearrange themselves into something less jarring. James Warwick, not Ridge, was Thomas's father. The ramifications challenged all she believed she understood about her family, marriage, and competition with Taylor. Ridge had raised Thomas as his own, loved him deeply, and created a legacy with him at Forrester Creations. But if this is true, Taylor has maintained a massive secret that has the potential to kill everyone. Why? And how long had she carried this alone? Brooke's immediate instinct was to approach Taylor and demand explanations. But something stopped her. She recalled Thomas's passion, his devotion to his mother, and his attempts to find his place in a family marked by power and betrayal. She thought about Taylor, whose life had been a succession of sacrifices, with her love for Ridge running through it all. Brooke understood what it meant to love Ridge, fight for him, lose him, and rebuild from the ashes. Could she condemn Taylor for keeping a secret so painful? However, the betrayal stung. Not just Ridge, but also the trust they had painstakingly created over the years. She waited until the following evening, when she knew Taylor would be alone in her beach house. The journey to Malibu was a blur, with the ocean stretching eternally to her left and the waves crashing in time with her rushing thoughts. Taylor paled when she opened the door and saw Brooke, as if she anticipated the storm approaching. "Brooke," she replied, her tone tense. "What's wrong?" Despite the tremble in her heart, Brooke held out the birth certificate with a calm hand. "We need to talk about this." Taylor's eyes widened and Brooke feared she would pass out. Instead, she stepped aside to allow Brooke into the house. The living room was pleasant, with soft lighting and a subtle aroma of lavender, but the air was thick with whispered facts. They sat across from each other, the birth certificate resting on the coffee table like a grenade. "How did you find it?" Taylor inquired, her tone barely above a whisper. "It doesn't matter," Brooke responded. "What matters is why. Why didn't you inform anybody? Not Ridge, Thomas, or me?" Taylor's attention shifted to her hands, twisting together. "You don't understand what it was like," she told me. "Back then everything was coming apart. Ridge was Ridge. You know how he was. I was pregnant alone and James was there. He was kind, Brooke. He loved me in a way I hadn't felt in years." Brooke listened as Taylor unloaded her story, a confession that had taken decades to make. It had been a brief affair, born out of loneliness and desperation during one of Ridge's frequent absences. James had been a lifeline, a guy who viewed Taylor not as a rival to Brooke or a player in the Forrester plot, but as a woman worthy of love. When she discovered she was pregnant, panic set in. Ridge had returned, promising a future with Taylor, and she couldn't bear to lose him again. So she made a decision, a falsehood that got heavier with every passing year. She informed Ridge that the baby was his, and James, ever the gentleman, promised to remain discreet, withdrawing from her life to ensure her happiness. "But Thomas," Brooke stated, her voice breaking. "He deserves to know who his father is." Taylor's eyes welled up with sorrow. "I understand. I had wanted to tell him 1,000 times. But how do you tell your son that the man he admires and who raised him isn't his biological father? How can you shatter his heart like that?" Brooke felt a flash of empathy, but it was overshadowed by wrath. "You crushed Ridge's heart too. And my. Taylor, we are family. We have fought and damaged each other, but we have always tried to be honest." The conversation lasted late into the night, with accusations, remorse, and naked honesty. Taylor revealed she had planned to inform Thomas once James reappeared in her life a few months ago, hoping to find closure. He had been diagnosed with a fatal illness, and the burden of their shared secret had grown unbearable. But fear had kept her silent, fear of losing Thomas, of upsetting the delicate peace she had established with Ridge and the Forresters. Brooke exited the beach house with more questions than answers. She drove home in quiet, the birth certificate tucked into her purse like a ticking time bomb. Over the next few days she struggled with what to do. Tell Ridge and risk breaking his friendship with Thomas. Tell Thomas, and watch him become enraged and confused. Or keep the secret like Taylor did, and live with the guilt of silence? Thomas was ultimately responsible for bringing the truth to light. He'd sensed the tension between his mother and Brooke, so he addressed her one evening at the Forrester estate. "What is going on?" he demanded, his voice strained with frustration. "You and Mom are hiding something. I'm not a kid anymore. I deserve to know." Brooke paused, her emotions racing. She reflected on all of the misery this family had experienced. Affairs, divorces, scandals, and how each revelation had left wounds. But she also thought of Thomas, a man looking for his identity, torn between his allegiance to his mother and his love for his father. He deserved to know the truth no matter how much it hurt. She handed him his birth certificate. "This is about your father," she explained softly. "Your real father." Thomas's face became pale as he read the document. The room appeared to shrink around them, the air heavy with the weight of the discovery. "James Warwick," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Did Mom lie to me? To Dad?" Brooke reached for him, but he backed away, his eyes filled with betrayal and despair. "Why didn't she tell you? Why didn't someone inform me?" The fallout was severe. Thomas confronted Taylor, their anger reverberating around the beach home as years of silent sorrow spilled out. Ridge was next, his disbelief giving way to a silent, seething rage, not toward Thomas but toward Taylor for keeping him in the dark. The Forrester family, already fragmented, was on the verge of implosion. Brooke watched everything unfold, torn between her feelings for Ridge and her sympathy for Taylor. She reflected on her own secrets, the falsehoods she told to protect those she loved, and wondered whether she was any different. The truth of Thomas's paternity didn't simply change his story. It pushed everyone to examine their own decisions and shortcomings. In the weeks that followed, Thomas sought out James Warwick, who was ailing and reaching the end of his life. Their meeting was timid and unpleasant, but it gave Thomas a glimpse of the man his mother adored. A guy who in his own way loved Thomas enough to let him leave. Taylor, meanwhile, battled to re-establish her bond with her kid, her guilt looming over everything. Ridge and Brooke forged their own path. Their love tested but unwavering, as it always had. The secret had affected them all, but it also provided a peculiar sense of clarity. Brooke saw it as a reminder that love, in all its manifestations, comes at a cost. Taylor learned the value of stillness via this experience. And for Thomas, it was the start of a journey to redefine family based on the relationships they decided to maintain rather than bloodlines. As the months went, the Forrester home became quieter. The wounds gradually healed. Brooke stood in her office one evening, with the same sketchpad open in front of her, but her gaze was fixed on the horizon. The glittering city lights below served as a reminder of the world beyond their drama. A world where secrets may be buried but never fully forgotten. The globe seemed to tilt in slow motion the moment the truth was revealed. It was one of those facts that had been buried for decades, hidden beneath falsehoods and held together by the fragile fabric of love and denial. Brooke described the epiphany as a jagged knife, sharp, harsh, and impossible to ignore. For Taylor, that was the moment when all she had created crumbled, each piece falling into the pit of treachery and remorse. For Thomas, it was the shattering of his identity, the collapse of the guy he saw himself to be. The day began regularly, with gentle Los Angeles sunshine flowing through the tall windows of the Forrester estate. Taylor had been sitting silently, nursing her coffee, her gaze fixed on nothing in particular. She had kept this secret for years, wearing it like a chain, and convinced herself it was for the greater good. However, secrets have a way of demanding attention, fighting their way up until they can no longer be ignored. Her quiet was broken this morning when Ridge probed her on why she appeared so aloof. "You're not telling me something," Ridge replied, his voice tight with anxiety but tinged with mistrust. "Taylor, I know you. You have been restless for weeks. What is it?" Taylor's lips shook as she held the mug, unwilling to meet his gaze. It would have been easier to remain silent, to pretend that she could bear the burden indefinitely. But she couldn't. The reality had already begun to spill around the edges, seeping into her dreams and disturbing her every interaction with Thomas. "It's about Thomas," she said softly, her throat clenching. Ridge creased his brow. "Thomas? What about him?" Taylor's voice cracked, and each sentence tasted like ash. "He is not your son, Ridge. He's Brooke's." The stillness that followed was dense and oppressive. The words hung in the air, and the entire room appeared to recoil. Ridge stood motionless, his chest rising and falling in erratic breaths. He examined her face for any indication that it was a cruel prank, or confirmation that it was not true. Taylor's tears, however, revealed her true emotions. "What did you just say?" Ridge eventually managed, his voice breaking. The confession came out in jagged shards. Years ago, amid the cloud of agony and bewilderment, Taylor made a decision that would change the path of their entire lives. There had been a child, a paternity test, and an option. She had found that Thomas was not Ridge's son, but Brooke's, the consequence of a convoluted and hidden moment of passion that Taylor had buried beneath layers of deception. She convinced herself she was protecting Ridge and Thomas. However, in actuality, she was protecting herself from losing everything. Ridge jerked back, holding the table's edge as if the earth had been pulled out from beneath him. His world, the family he believed in, the boy he raised, the woman he trusted, had become unrecognizable. Thomas entered halfway through the confession. He initially believed he had misheard, and that his mother was delusional. But when the truth became clear in her words, the floor underneath him collapsed. "I am Brooke's son?" Thomas mumbled, his voice soft and frail, like if he were a child again. Taylor turned to him, sobbing and reaching out, but he recoiled as if her touch was burning. "No!" He choked and shook his head wildly. "You can't say that to me. You don't get to take away my life like this." For Thomas, everything he knew about himself, his history, his choices, his problems, and even his darkness, had suddenly become someone else's. The father he respected, the family name he bore, the closeness he enjoyed with Steffi and his siblings, none of it was genuine. He felt like a stranger in his own body. The repercussions were quick and harsh. Brooke burst into tears at hearing the news. She had no idea, no inkling, that the child she believed she had lost forever was right in front of her eyes, grown into a man she had reprimanded, supported, and occasionally dreaded. He was now hers by blood, but their tie was severed before it could form. The Forrester family split down the middle. Ridge was distraught, torn between rage and despair. He struggled to look at Taylor, the woman who had previously been his haven. Every shared memory with Thomas became poisoned, and every smile was a reminder of the deception. And Thomas, stuck in the midst, descended into a murky fog that horrified everyone around him. He traversed the city aimlessly, troubled by questions that gnawed at his thoughts. Who was he today? Was he still a Forrester? Was his life worth anything? The love he craved from Ridge felt phony. The acceptance he sought from his siblings suddenly appeared tenuous. Brooke, his biological mother, represented both redemption and suffering. There were times when Thomas considered simply leaving, slipping into the anonymity of the world, where no one would look at him with sympathy or suspicion. He stood on the cliffs one night, staring out at the vast ocean, the pounding waves below whispering promises of release. He considered letting the river consume him, or eliminating himself to alleviate his suffering. But then he heard Steffi's voice ringing in his thoughts, telling him that he was her brother regardless of blood. He clung to that flimsy thread, even if it felt thinner by the day. Taylor, meanwhile, crumbled under the weight of her shame. She had shattered her son's sense of self, ripped Ridge's heart in two, and deprived Brooke of the years she could have spent with her child. The family she hoped to protect now stared at her with betrayed eyes. Alone in her chamber, she rehearsed the decision she made, tormenting herself with the what-ifs. Every night, she muttered apologies into the darkness, knowing they meant nothing now. Brooke attempted to overcome the unfathomable gap between herself and Thomas. She reached out to him, gently and tentatively, but he always jerked away. "You don't get to call me your son," he shouted out, tears streaming down his cheeks. "You were not present when I needed you. You did not raise me. You don't know me." Each rejection devastated her heart, but she refused to give up. She sent him notes he never read, left voicemails he never returned, and observed him from afar when he thought no one was around. She wanted to cuddle him, tell him he was loved, and make up for all the wasted years. However, when love becomes entangled with betrayal, it can feel like a weapon rather than a gift. The weeks stretched into months and the wound worsened. Ridge moved away, reluctant to face Taylor or Brooke. He withdrew from the family, his once solid presence now a hollow shadow. The Forrester house, once filled with laughing and conflicts, felt colder and quieter, like a tomb for what once was. Thomas's darkness intensified. He lashed out at those closest to him, ruining his relationships and driving people away before they might abandon him. Deep down, he worried he would never fit in, that he was destined to be an outcast, a mistake created of falsehoods. However, in the midst of the confusion, a curious sense of clarity began to emerge. Despite his broken state, Thomas knew he had a choice. He had two options: let the revelation utterly ruin him or remake himself on his own terms. He was not simply Ridge's, Brooke's, or Taylor's son. He was his own man, and perhaps that was enough. It was not a happy ending. The wounds lingered, etched deeply into each one. Taylor suffered with the consequences of her deception, her once large family now dispersed. Ridge carried the sadness of losing the son he believed he had, even as he attempted to accept him in a new way. Brooke held out hope that one day Thomas would see her not as the absent mother, but as the mother who desperately wanted to love him right now. Thomas felt as if he belonged to both families at the same time. In calm periods he stood on the rocks, gazing at the horizon. The waves continued to whisper, but this time he responded with words of promise rather than surrender. He promised not to let the truth kill him, even if it meant destroying the world he once knew. And so they all lived, broken and aching, linked by love, betrayal, and blood. Yes, there is a family, but it is a family that has been permanently traumatized.